always difficult to overcome the inertia of the establishment and their enforcement historically on this. And so that's always our challenge. The good news is that, well, the 113th Congress, we're just finishing, the 114th begins in January, we have a working majority on the floor of the House on hemp-related issues. So we were able to pass amendments pretty sizably. We were able to pass an amendment 246 to 162 to say that DOJ and DEA cannot use funds to prevent state agricultural agencies and universities from growing industrial hemp. We were able to pass that, an amendment to the Farm Bill, which allowed college institutes and universities to cultivate hemp, and that one was agreed 225 to 200. Even when we pass them, we still have problems implementing them through the DEA. For instance, in Kentucky, the DEA seized hemp seeds that were designated for a university research pilot project. We had to get involved again, and finally, after 2 weeks, they released 250 pounds of confiscated hemp seeds. But the fact that we were able to pass that amendment on the floor of the House and then work with, as soon as we were able to escalate up the implementation of it, they released the impounded hemp. But this is why your involvement is so important, talking to your state legislators, your members of Congress, your senators, about why this is important, what they can do to support it, and just making sure that we have universal support on both sides of the aisle, because we don't. I mean, we only, by a vote of 225 to 200, allowed universities to do research in industrial hemp. That should have been like 400 to 0. I mean, there's just no reason why somebody should vote the other way, but we barely won, because there's 200 members of Congress that, who knows, perhaps don't know what hemp is, or are misinformed because maybe they only listen to somebody at DEA who, for no reason at all, classifies hemp as in the same category as heroin, as worse than heroin. It makes no sense, but that's what we need to change. And as soon as anybody looks at it, they agree. Colorado State University and CU were applied for and were granted a license to do industrial hemp research. Colorado Department of Agriculture is registered with the DEA and has been allowed to bring seed into the state to give to research universities, which is now the law that we passed in the Farm Bill. Obviously one of the key barriers to having a strong domestic hemp industry is seeds. And some of that is research, because we need to reliably produce seeds that qualify as industrial hemp that have below 0.3 THC, and I think even substantially below that as we progress on this development. We shouldn't have to do what we do now, which is farmers have to pay themselves out of pocket to test and verify their own crop. We don't have scalable quantities of certified seed, which is how it works in any other country that has industrial hemp. They say, okay, you grow one of these certified seeds and you're good. You're good to go. You can grow it. What we do now in Colorado, we do have a number of farmers that are planting and experimenting with industrial hemp, is who knows where they get their seed, and then they have to test their own crops and demonstrate to the State Department of Agriculture that it's compliant with 0.3. And it's sometimes difficult because the THC levels can depend on the conditions under which it's grown. If it's hot, if there's this much water, if there's that much water. But through the research that we expect to complete at CSU and other universities, we should be able to develop certified varieties that are always below 0.3 and can be certified by the state. And as long as you use those seeds, you won't have to do any additional compliance. But this all doesn't happen automatically. It happens because of your involvement and your advocacy. And we wouldn't even be where we are today if it wasn't for people dedicated to this industrial crop here, consumers that are passionate about it, and as the industry grows, that voice needs to become even stronger. We are situated well here in Colorado with our agricultural heritage, our strong ag research at CSU and research at CU, our state laws, Amendment 64, which passed, of course, here, and our state is in the forefront of licensing hemp production. And we have our sizable consumer products industry, marketing expertise. It's a great state to really be in the middle of the job creation associated with domestic industrial hemp opportunities. So with that, before we move on, I'd be happy to take any questions.
In regards to seed, if we have the capabilities to procure it and have it brought to the state, is there any way right now that we could do that? without the federal government seizing that seed?
So it can legally be brought in by CSU and CU. They have a license to do that. We, where farmers in our state get it from, we don't really know. Now, where we need to get, and it will be the goal, and it should be, relatively soon. I mean, we should be able to get there in 2 to 3 years if we advocate correctly, is that we're producing here in our state
Right.
scalable quantities of certified seed. And that's where we want to get. That involves the university research component. It involves Department of Agriculture here certifying varieties. And that means testing them for a year, of course, before they're certified in different environments. So that's where we would like to be in 2 or 3 years. But obviously, it's a problem now. We know that. And of course, it's a problem now for anybody who's farming or considering farming hemp. There's no certified seed, period. And then even getting scalable quantities is very difficult.
Is it a possibility that through the university system that they could do that, or they only directly have?
You'd have to inquire with them. I mean, absolutely, they can do research, and so that involves, they do plan for research purposes, so I don't, not for commercial purposes, but you can inquire with them.
Congressman?
Yes.
I read an article today that said that the Department of Justice is saying that Native Americans can now grow marijuana on the reservation. Does that mean by inference that they can grow hemp?
Indian nations have a great degree of autonomy. So, of course, there's been legal use, for instance, of peyote in religious ceremonies on Native American lands. So, I didn't read the specific article about developments today, but they do have more autonomy than, for instance, a state would. They're sovereign nations within our country.
So is it CDA's intent to treat industrial hemp like any other crop with its certification process? So by that I mean, is it their intent to certify uniformity in the field, germination rate, and yield in addition to the THC content?
So do we have anybody here from Colorado Department of Agriculture?
We do.
Okay.
Dwayne is right behind you.
Dwayne, do you want to answer that?
So we are, as Representative Polis mentioned, we're working with CSU and CU to try to, some of the barriers that they felt that were on federal funding and importation of seed and all those things. They've actually formed both schools call it something different, so for lack of a better term, I'll call it an organization called Coherent that allows them to work together to try to solve some of these issues jointly, not separately, so they feel they've got a better leverage. And that includes the CDA. And so part of the process, some of the things we've talked about have been working towards certified seed that we think just a week ago, 10 days ago, I met with the Colorado seed growers, and that was one of the topics that we talked about.
So that's the intent, to develop that
That is
same
the-
certification? Okay.
Was I being kind of overly optimistic in saying 2 to 3 years for when we can get there? Is that?
Probably very optimistic, but 3 to 4, I'd say, before we get enough testing in the field, and that's assuming that we can get the CSU to put it in the fields and start to do some testing this year, start to build on the database of which varieties. I would tell you that just a couple of days ago, that's where they were at, was looking again at varieties. And I got a call from a couple of experimental stations that have told me that they've got hemp sites planned, so.
And can that only be done through the universities, or could that also be accomplished through public or private entities?
The research has to be done, just as Representative Polis said, it is really limited to institutions of higher education or on property that the CDA owns, of which it would probably be a violation of our HOA to put it out front of the Ag Department's building, which is the only property we have.
I just want to mention there's going to be an event on Friday that Dwayne's going to be presenting. That's a great place to ask questions specifically of the CDA. So why don't we?
Any other questions for me? Yes.
Assuming everything goes forward with minimal issues, would there be an opportunity then for the final product to be shipped outside of Colorado, or would it still have to be sold?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have hemp products, there's no controls. I mean, you can bring them into the state now, and you always could. So this is growing of hemp. I mean, we've imported hemp products in and out of the state for forever, so it's and across the country lines as well. So I mean, I know it makes no sense, any of it, but there's never been any problem with the product. So I mean, if you make hemp sweaters or whatever, there's no problems at all with domestic or international export that I've heard of.
How about the
Quote-unquote farmers, and I say that because it could be everything from your backyard to 100 acres. Of that, there's probably a handful of folks that are seriously interested in growing industrial hemp, and whatever they can produce will be bought. I mean, there's enough of a market for that already. We still net import a lot of hemp into the state. We aren't even close to producing what we use.
Jerry, can you talk a little bit more about what you foresee happening in the 114th Congress?
Sure, we do. Yeah, go ahead. Good question. Did Mara put you up to it? Well, we're going to continue. I mean, we still have, I would say the single biggest issue that we see is seed. So I would like to see us focus more on how seeds are moved between states and frankly across international borders, because I think somebody said absolutely from Canada we should be able to acquire seed that has gone through their extensive certification process and work with it here. That would accelerate our own development. So that will be where we focus. That and of course continued efforts to make sure that any laws to the contrary are not enforced by DEA or other agencies in states that have allowed for cultivation and have a regulatory structure.
Mine was actually with the turnover in Congress, I mean, how's the crystal ball looking?
So, and that's going to be very important because, as I said, we had a narrow working majority on some of these issues. So on the two hemp votes, one of them was 246, 262. The other was 225 to 200. So especially 225 to 200, that allows the universities to do research. Doesn't leave a lot of breathing room. So obviously we have to poll and try to convince these new members, including one from Colorado, right? Ken Buck, he's a new one from Colorado. And Cory Gardner is now a senator. So those two in particular, you have to work on to get them to support it. And in general, I found that newer members tend to be better on these issues. A lot of the opposition is from kind of the curmudgeonly folks who've been there 20 years and kind of haven't been exposed to reality. But that's not true in every case. It's, we can't take it for granted. So we don't know yet for sure with 60, 70 new members. So we don't know if we have a working majority yet. We have to make sure that these new members, at least half of them, vote the right way, so that we still have that working majority. But we do not know that. There's a lot of new members.
Corey helped sponsor the
I think he'll be okay. He's not a sponsor of the hemp bill. He voted the right way on the amendment. And so hopefully he'll be okay. Ken Buck is the new one. He has most of the ag areas of the state in his district, so I hope that he's hearing from people. So that's what we need to do, and then new ones from other areas of the country.
How about those people that are importing the pastes and making the oils? There's a few companies here in Colorado, and then they sell them nationwide with the high CBD counts, but it hit below 0.3 THC. Are you familiar with people that are doing that?
I don't know if we've talked to those folks.
We've talked to a few of them. People, though, aren't running into a lot of problems with importing that we've heard on our side. That doesn't mean it's not happening, though.
I've not heard, I don't know this product, but I mean, if you're talking about processed hemp products and food supplements, apparel, we have not heard of any problems on that side, as long as there's no, drug content or anything like that.
Yeah, was a question specifically about importation, because I work in one of those companies.
Oh, okay.
I can answer that question pretty easily.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, we haven't had any issues. We have like 3 consistent suppliers right now. We've gotten into it.
And you guys are allowed to ship it to every state, right?
We haven't run into any issues except one wholesaler in Connecticut. A concerned customer sent the product to the state drug control agency that's affiliated with the DEA. So they said, you can't have that, of course. So, other than that, no issues.
We have not heard of any, so yeah.
Congressman, in terms of job creation, we hear about this so much, but where do you see Colorado leading job creation with the hemp industry?
I think we have a lot of great opportunities. So, I mean, really across the board, because our state has a very diverse workforce. So, I mean, we have a lot of great consumer product companies here in Colorado. We have that know-how in the Denver metro area, Broomfield, Boulder, Denver. Health products, we have a huge health products industry. So I fully expect that there will be a lot of companies that use as an ingredient or a main ingredient and some already do, by the way, they just have to import the hemp from other places, but even more so, into high value, very high value products. We will also, we have an agricultural division, we'll also have that, we'll have processing, of course. So I think we really are well situated for jobs in all fronts. In any, agricultural product, I mean, the better jobs and most jobs will be around the highest value uses of it, right? So I mean, hemp is a commodity, that's always nice, it's interesting, everything's a commodity, corn, soybeans, hemp will be as well, but that's not going to be where the biggest amount of money or jobs are, it will be the highest value uses.
So if you saw 2 or 3 products or brands come out of Colorado in the next 5 years, 10 years, say, would there be 2 or 3 sectors or industries where you'd say, wow, that's something that's Colorado, where you'd say, this new product in an automotive industry, or this new biofuel application, is there one kind of in your mind?
How can I predict it, right? I mean, but I just think that Colorado, they're very creative, we have different skill sets here, engineers, marketing, all of that. So I have no doubt that, there's so many areas that hemp is used in, right? And there's opportunities in all of those. And I think we'll have a natural advantage with production and processing here. So, again, it's hard to predict which.
Go entrepreneurism, right?
Yeah, go entrepreneurism.
Are you planning or willing to introduce the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2015?
Yeah, we already have a hemp, industrial hemp farming bill that I'm a sponsor of. So I assume we'll be reintroducing that next session. I don't know if we're going to make any changes or not.
Is it nationwide or is that state?
That's between state lines and international lines. It's still up to the state what they want to do in their own borders, but it would completely eliminate the issue that we have with state lines and international. No, that bill doesn't yet have enough support to pass. We've never been able to pass that, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But if we can get amendments into different bills to move it along, we're going to try. So you all need to be the advocates to talk to your federal members of Congress and your state legislators on issues that are important. You'll learn some techniques. The key thing is they hear from you under a million different things under the sun. You go in with 1 or 2 things you want to pound, and you each tell them that maybe in different ways, but you don't want to go off track or go on a totally different direction. You say these are the 2 asks, and then you try to pin them down. Where are you on these 2 things? Do you support, allowing seed to be, whatever the issues are specifically for the state and for the federal? There'll be different asks in both, and you need to be very specific about your asks. You need to try to line up commitments, and then hold, of course, the elected officials accountable for what they tell you. And if they are not at all supportive, you'll have the opportunity to replace them in the next election. So, but thank you, and we'll let you get your work underway. So.